There does seem to be this disconnect between what we're hearing from D.C. and what we're hearing here about leases and permits and why the U.S. industry is not pumping more oil to try to bring down prices. What's the truth? What is the answer to that right now?
Yeah, Brian, great to see you again. It's always good to see you. 99% of the wells are being drilled on private lands in this country, and that's where most of the oil and gas is coming from. There's very few on federal leases. I think the administration is talking about leases that are 10 years. You can, when you get a federal lease, you have it for 10 years or longer. Some of those leases are way out west. Some are in the Gulf of Mexico. And so they're using that really as an excuse to complain about our industry. Our industry comes from the independents. It comes from all the drilling on private lands, and that's where the activity is.
And the private lands, you don't need all the leases. I mean, this is your land. You own it. You can do what you want. So this lease or permitting issue on federal lands, while relevant on the margin, is not going to solve the problem that we are looking to solve.
Not at all. It's another excuse they're using in regard to condemning our industry and not involving our industry and supporting fossil fuels to be energy secure in this country.
What can you do, not you, Scott Sheffield, maybe you, Scott Sheffield, but the industry do to try to get more on the same page with the Biden administration? The Biden administration clearly believes that we need to have, at least in the short term, more oil and gas. They've acknowledged that's the way to bring down prices, speaking reportedly with Venezuela, perhaps talking to Saudi Arabia. So they acknowledge there's a need for more oil. How do you two come together? Is there a common ground?
Yes, over the last several weeks, I've been advocating an export ban on all Russian oil and gas. So I was the first CEO to come out and speak about it over the last couple of weeks. I'm glad to see the president do it today. Other countries in the EU, all Western countries need to do it. We need to bankrupt the oil and gas industry in Russia. Secondly, Pioneer is growing 5% a year long term. So we're going to get up to about 1 million barrels of oil equivalent over the next 8 years. So the Permian is still growing. It's growing from 5 million barrels a day to about 8 million barrels a day over the next 8 to 9 years. Now, the question is can we increase that growth? We have a contract with our shareholders to pay back 80% of our free cash flow back to the investor. So we have to get shareholder support. We want the Biden administration to come out and support our industry, and we want people to ban oil and gas around the world.
So the idea, if I'm hearing you right, Scott, is the idea being that after years of capital destruction, not as much by your company, but by many who filed for bankruptcy over the last number of years, shareholders are very nervous and they're very upset and they're very wary. What you're asking the Biden administration to do is kind of bless you and your industry to spend more money on production so that you have some cover to say to the shareholders, listen, we are being asked to do this by the president. It's a patriotic thing. Shame on you if you then decide to sell our stock or withhold money.
It's not as easy as that, Brian.
Well, this TV, nothing is.
I know. So it's not as easy as that, but we need support of our fossil fuel industry. Banks aren't loaning. There's no private equity out there in our industry. And so it's got to start with the president to send a new message. So I like what he did today. He sent a message, we're banning Russian oil and gas imports. The EU needs to do it. The UK did it. Canada did it. We need Japan, South Korea to do it. And then you're probably going to lose about 3 to 4 million barrels a day, potentially.
That's a lot.
There's only two places you can get it from, Saudi and the UAE. He needs to go back. He needs to go to Saudi, take a trip immediately, and reestablish relationships with Saudi. Secondly, he needs to support our industry. Only the U.S. shale industry can help solve this long term, and the Saudis and the UAE.
But it's odd to hear an American oil and gas producer say we need to go to the Saudis. Is that simply because in the near term, there's nothing we can do? The CEO of ConocoPhillips told us earlier today that if he made the phone call and he called up his board and said, let's produce more oil starting tomorrow, and they started putting everything in motion, by the time that first drop of new oil comes out of the ground, it's going to be minimum of 8 months, more likely a year. Is that the problem? It's
yes.
Not turning on a tap.
No, exactly. We also have shortages of frac sand already. We have labor shortages. We have shortages of frac fleets, rigs that need to be put back together. So the labor force has gone through 3 downturns in the last 12 years. People do not want to go back to Midland. They've changed industries. So that's why it takes a good 8 to 12 months just to get things back together.
Well, the industry has been, for lack of a better term, insane the last number of years. Scott, as you know, I've been out to Midland. I've been to Bakken a number of times. Oil's at 100. Then it's at negative 37. Now it's at 125. 2 years ago, the oil market, I agree, it's futures, not physical oil, but the futures market was negative $40. That was almost 2 years ago to the day. And here we are at 125. Why should anybody believe in the stability, from a labor perspective, the stability of that industry when it is just all over the place?
That's exactly right. And you couple that with post-COVID, a lot of people aren't coming back to work. They've changed industries. They don't want to work long hours. And that you couple that, the older issue, with 3 downturns in 12 years, with post-COVID, and you just can't hire people. So that's a big issue also.
What about steel, water, truck drivers? We heard the Occidental CEO, who we hope to hear from in a bit, talk about just supply chain issues that other industries, food, whatever it is, are facing, hitting oil and gas too.
We're not seeing it ourselves. We're the largest producer in the Permian. We have 50% of our contracts already locked in. So people want to work for Pioneer, but we're hearing it from other activity increases. We're also hearing about the privates. They can't get the equipment or the labor force.